Space Adventure, Book 1, New Orders. Chapter 7. R-Bar, Deck 15, Karma 1, Sector 6. I wheeled myself up to the bar, the long length that they served the drinks from. It was too high for me to see over from the chair, but a female voice called over to me. "Honey, go grab a table. I'll bring you your drink." That was kind. "Thank you," I called back to the disembodied voice. I assumed she was addressing me. The R-Bar was just as busy as it had been the other night during the attack, maybe a little more so even. The place where the light fittings had fallen down seemed to be half repaired and was roped off to keep people away from it. I wheeled over to a table that didn't mean navigating steps, obviously, but was far enough into the open plan seating area that I could see both doors. There was something about sitting near doors. It felt like sitting in a thoroughfare, and even though there wasn't much traffic, the energy still disturbed me. Humans would talk about it in terms of an ancient art called feng shui. My people would talk about it in terms of energy flow. Some of us are more sensitive than others, but everyone can feel these things. I had barely settled at the table when a human female appeared. She smiled brightly, but her voice was deep, low, pleasant to listen to. "What can I get you?" she asked. I don't know, I'm not familiar with human drinks." "I have some vegan basics if you like." And I smiled, but then reconsidered. "Actually, I thought I might try the human alcohol, if you don't mind. What do they drink most often in here?" She thought for a moment, her dark features emanating a soulful light as she toyed in her mind with what might be interesting to a vegan. "You had alcohol before?" she checked, using a similar tone to a doctor asking questions during an examination. "Only a few times. It got me tipsy." I searched for the words quickly. She nodded knowingly. "Okay, I'll get you something that isn't too strong. You okay with beer?" I was vaguely aware of beer, though each was different. They all seemed to be long drinks that could either be strong or weak. Generally, they were a brown colour. I nodded. "Beer, yes, I'll have a beer." She grinned and swaggered off back to the bar. I sat there, taking in the mostly relaxed atmosphere. A smooth, mellow music lilted through the bar, accompanying the gentle hum of chatter from the various tables. For the first time, I noticed that the dark backdrop over the far side wasn't just a dark-coloured wall. It was a window onto space. Well, at least partially. In the top part of the view, I could see across to the other side of the ship. Putting it together in my head, I realised that this was the centre of the triangle of the ship, and the ship had been designed with a small hole in the centre. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what would be the engineering advantage to that. The designers had forfeited all that space. And weight, granted. And sure, drag wasn't an issue in a vacuum, but not all of space is vacuum. I wondered if and how it would help with manoeuvrability. I pulled out my handheld and started sketching and dropping some notes, referring back to the deck plans occasionally. I must have been completely absorbed in it because when the barmaid returned with my beer, she startled me. "Here you go," she said, plopping it down on the table. "I settled with the one with the least alcohol. Give me a wave if I can get you another." "Thank you," I smiled before returning my attention to the weird puzzle that I'd just uncovered. It seemed like no time at all had passed when I became vaguely aware of someone talking to me very close by. The lighting in the bar had also been dimmed and it glowed with a soft blue light, something my delicate vegan eyes very much appreciated. I glanced up to see Rupert. He had been saying something. "Rupert, sorry, did you say something?" "Yes, I was asking if you minded if I joined you." He had his hand on the chair opposite me. "Sure, not at all." I pulled my thoughts from the calculations I'd been noodling. It could wait. Perhaps Rupert might have some information that would help me. I made a mental note to ask if I got the opportunity. He ordered a drink from the waitress with the smile and the swagger, and then turned back to me. It seemed my mind was starting to clear, despite the 3 sips of beer I'd had. I knew what to ask him about first, though. "So, how's your work going deciphering the comm signature?" He took off his glasses and pinched at his eyes, exhaling. "That good, eh?" I noted. "Yeah, that good," he confirmed. His drink arrived. It looked similar to mine, maybe a touch darker. He took a long swig. "Every time I think that I'm making progress, I hit a wall," he confessed. "I've left another hunch running on the computer while I take a break." He stared down at his beer, his eyes defocusing, lost. I wished there was something I could say to him. Unfortunately, rock and hard place, I decided to do the next best thing, change the subject. "Well, it sounds like we're both having a hard day. I came straight here from the med bay." He glanced up. "You okay?" "Yeah, mostly, I hope. The device I had on my legs, they weren't doing anything, so they tried some stronger implants. Now it's a case of hoping they can fix whatever is wrong." He looked uncomfortable for a moment. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karma. That's terrible." I shrugged. I didn't want to go there. "I'm lucky to be alive," I told him. "I'm sure Dr. Summer knows what she's doing. If these implants work, I'll be on my feet in no time." I forced a smile. The truth was, if this didn't work, I didn't know if there were going to be many options beyond that, and the thought of never getting my legs back was just something I wasn't ready to consider yet. Then I noticed a small group of officers come into the bar. Amongst them was Commander Hooflix. My heart leapt in my chest. They walked up to the bar and started ordering drinks. I decided quickly that the most dignified and sensible thing I could do was nothing. I forced myself to look away. I was just scrambling for some way to continue the conversation with Rupert when there was a sound over what must have been the ship's internal announcement system. The voice that spoke was gravelly and commanding. "This is your chief speaking. I have an announcement to make. Yesterday, at 16:20 hours, Karma 1 was attacked by a ship of unknown origin. We were fortunate in our ability to fight it off. It retreated, but has since been spotted several sectors away at the edge of the void. League Command just issued new orders. We will be changing course and pursuing it, rather than docking at Station 731. All duty officers, please start to make appropriate arrangements." I froze, trying to process what this meant for me. I know, selfish, but I was meant to be disembarking tomorrow morning. Now that's not happening. Now I was stuck on this ship in the middle of what was going to become a war of civilizations. These humans have no idea what they're charging into. I should tell them. I'm not meant to, but maybe I could tell them enough to convince them that going after this ship is beyond a bad idea. It's the worst idea in all of human history. Worse than creating the atom bomb. Worse than picking a fight with the Taurians back in the day. And I mean orders of magnitude worse. They may not survive this bad decision. And I don't mean the ship. I mean the human race. Don't get me wrong, the League is solid. All the more advanced civilizations in it will do their part, to a point. But if it comes to going to war with the Greys, they won't be seen for the warp signatures backing the hell out of here. They'll abandon whole outposts before engaging. History told me that. "Karma, you all right?" Rupert was talking to me again. "You've got a funny colour." Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, that was a shock to me. I was expecting to get off at Station 731 tomorrow." His eyes widened and he recoiled ever so slightly. "You were leaving us? You never said anything." "I assumed everyone would know. I didn't think those who were rescued stayed on board." He frowned. "Yeah, I suppose you're right. I just didn't think." His mood seemed to settle. "But there was something else. What is it?" I tried to fob him off with just saying that it had been a long day, etc. The guy was smarter than I gave him credit for. He eyed me firmly, and after a moment of studying me, he seemed to make the decision to pursue it. "Look," he said, pushing his beer aside. "I noticed your reaction when you saw those comm signatures yesterday. And now we get this announcement and we're going after these guys? You know something. Something big. And something that you don't think you can share. And I can't figure out if it's because you think we'll all think you crazy or because it's so terrible you can't even speak it. But it's something. And I think the stakes are high enough that I'm going to have to ask you to spill. Shit, how did he... I thought I was being discreet. Stars and quasars. Shit. I took a swig of my beer and braced myself. I didn't know how much I was going to say before I started, but I'd just throttle it as best I could as I went along. Maybe I can give him just enough to convince this chief to stand down, and I set my beer down and met his intense gaze. Okay, you're right, I did recognize it, and I know what you're going after, and you need to convince your chief not to do it. We won't survive, and you'll provoke something that will lead back to the entire League. He's signing our death warrant if he takes us out after that ship. Rupert was silent for a moment. He took off his glasses and polished them before replacing them on his face. I believe you. Now help me convince the chief. How? I was still shocked that this was going so fast. He believed me with almost zero information. Before I knew what was happening, he was glancing around the bar. We're going to need more information, he muttered to me. Evidence, something. Hang on. He waved to one of the officers over at the bar. They were deep in conversation, no doubt speculating about the chief's orders. He mouthed something to one of the officers, and that officer tapped Hooflix on the shoulder and pointed him in our direction. Rupert mouthed something else, and Hooflix picked up his drink, excused himself from the group, and came over. What was Rupert doing? I felt myself start to panic. The situation suddenly became exponentially more complex. Hello, Rupert. Karma. Hooflix glared as Rupert signalled for him to sit with us. He sat down. What's on your mind? He asked Rupert. Rupert looked uncomfortable, but visibly steeled himself before he began speaking. It seems Karma has some more information about this ship we encountered. She tells me it's a bad idea to go after it. We're going to have to take this to the chief. Hooflix looked like he was processing the new information. What can you tell us, Karma? He asked, now looking at me. My mouth went dry. Why were they taking me so seriously? I wasn't used to this. Not much, I managed. Only that this ship is dangerous. If you go after it, we'll all die. Of that I'm certain. How do you know this? He pressed. I shrugged. I hadn't thought this through. I was winging it on how much I could reveal. Frack. We know of them in the Vega system. We have experience. I can't talk about that experience, but you have to trust me. The only way to deal with this threat is not to go after it. There was a flicker of something across his features. Something I couldn't read. He spoke again. Your people know of this threat and haven't informed the League. Please, I'm sworn not to divulge certain information. I can't break that oath. The consequences to humanity could be irreparable. But at the same time, going after this ship will spell the end. You need to convince the chief not to change course. He shook his head and looked at me intensely. No, Karma. We do. Our bar, Deck 15, Karma 1, Sector 7. So, it turned out that being vegan, the humans were already aware that I knew more than they did about what lay beyond their sectors of the universe. Hence, there was little convincing required to get them to pay attention. It seemed that my bigger problem was not revealing too much. My goal, I decided, was to tell them as little as possible and get them to have this order rescinded. Easy. The trek from the R-Bar up to the chief's office, just off the command centre, felt like it took an eternity. I tried to remember the route as we went, but each turn looked like the one before. I was glad that Commander Hooflix was pushing my chair. I couldn't have made it this distance on my own. The alcohol in my system, all 5 sips, was metabolizing fast. I felt the after effects kicking in and felt slightly sick. Granted, that could have been the anxiety about going against my oath and changing the direction of the ship. It might also have been the heavy weight of having the future of humanity hanging on the next words that would come out of my mouth too. But hey, who's counting? As the yellow carpet disappeared stride after stride beneath my wheels, I considered carefully what I was going to say, how I was going to convince the chief. After all, he had orders. Orders that by all appearances had been signed off by agreement of the League, which would have included the various Pleiadians over at command. The thought occurred to me that perhaps they knew something I didn't, else why wouldn't they have stopped the mission? Maybe I was interfering where I shouldn't be. What if this was part of the plan for them to engage the Greys in some sophisticated way? What if I was messing something up, but sending the humans, the gun-toting hillbillies, into this situation? Surely there was no way this was going to end in peace. The only outcome of that would be firefight. They knew that. No, if they had been a plan for peace, it wouldn't have involved sending an untrained, unbriefed ship into a volatile situation. Or would it? My mind churned. Maybe we were the ones to draw the fire and then maybe be made an example of in the name of building a bridge of trust. Maybe we were just phase one of something more elaborate in which war needed to be started in order to end it. Maybe they had other things in place to take over once we had been annihilated. If our destruction meant saving the rest of the League and all the civilizations within it, that would be a sacrifice we would all make. But that was a utilitarian view, something humans would use. It didn't employ the cosmic wisdom of the Atolls, Orcs, or the Vegans. Heck, even the Taurians are skeptical about using hypothetical plans to justify dark acts in the moment. Yep, only humans would actually base a plan on that kind of reasoning. Everyone else understood karmic law at the highest order and how the oath to live by those higher laws transcended any material gain that might be wrought. Damn it, I wasn't going to figure this out before facing the chief. And it wasn't a conversation I could have with him. It would be like trying to discuss the intricacies of string theory with a layman who had read about the principles written by a journalist. You've got several languages missing, several math languages or windows onto the problem. There is no way to see the reality without the windows or the layers. We approached the set of double doors at the end of a corridor. The layout was different compared to other corridors. This ended at a door. All the other corridors seemed to have no real end. They all merged onto other corridors, presumably all the way around. Rupert stepped ahead and punched in a code. The doors slid open and Hooflix wheeled me in first. Rupert followed. The other side of the door was like another world. We found ourselves at the top of what must be the command center for the ship. I swallowed hard. I was out of my depth. I know vegan tech is way beyond what the humans had, but I'm just a girl who ran away from conformity. I've never served on a ship like this. I've never been a part of a crew this big, commanding such a feat of technology. I'd also never had to influence anyone in the way that I was about to. Officers worked away at their stations. I noticed Zorkian up front, presumably piloting the ship. She had multiple maps in holographic form spanning several dimensions. She looked like she was at peace as she navigated and steered the ship. I wondered briefly how a Zorkian could find peace in such a low-tech environment, doing primarily human missions. I wondered briefly if the League might have installed her to keep an eye on the predominantly human crew and agenda. Commander Hooflix wheeled me down the ramp. He'd already pinged the chief en route to let him know that we needed to speak to him. The chief was expecting us, me included. There was a door off to the left of the command center. Hooflix hit a button. The doors slid open a moment later and he pushed me inside. The chief stood when we entered. His uniform was like the others for the most part. He had additional decorations on the collar and sleeves. He looked strong, burly almost. He held out his hand over his desk. It was a stretch for him to reach me, but we shook hands. Hooflix introduced us. Chief, this is Karma. Karma, this is Chief Copernicus. My mind flicked through human history. Copernicus. That was the name of a mathematician and a spiritual terrain who had proposed heliocentrism to the humans back in their early history. He basically changed the entire view of the universe with this one observation, softening their minds up to be more flexible for a sequence of realizations that eventually led to putting men in space. Let's hope this guy has an open mind to the truth. Good to meet you, Chief. Thanks for seeing us. The officers sat and Rupert explained the situation, including how he'd pressed me to reveal what I'd told him. I guess that made it more believable, that I was reluctant to share this intel until it was absolutely necessary. After a moment of quiet, the chief levelled his gaze at me. And this oath you mentioned to my officers, what exactly is that? I've said too much already, sir. I'm sorry. His expression didn't so much as flicker. You realise what you're asking me to do, though, don't you? You're suggesting I should disobey a direct order from Central League and what? Do nothing. Do you realise how insane that is? I'd be court-martialed. I'm sorry, sir. I do realise this is a lot to ask. It's a situation that suddenly became huge. I allowed myself to be genuine. I didn't even try to talk to him like an officer. If he thought that I was too strong-willed or willful, he'd press more. If I looked like a little girl, he'd give me an easier time, I was pretty sure. To be honest, I continued, trying not to sound too competent, I don't know why the League would send you after the ship. I've been grappling with that myself. It's not like there aren't officers, people in command who know what I know and more. So that should tell you something, shouldn't it, Karma? It sounded like the little girl act was working. Yes, sir, it does. I lowered my gaze. And I also have the weight of my own conscience. While I don't understand the big picture, I know without a doubt that going into this battle with that ship is wrong. You'll lose, we'll lose, and the League will be next. I know how they operate, and I can't for the life of me think of any reason why anyone would knowingly send a ship to start a chain of events like that we're likely to see. To be clear, sir, this isn't just our lives we're talking about, it's the lives of everyone living in League territory. The chief was silent for a while again. He sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers in front of him. I knew that position. I knew the position that I'd put him in. It was a tough call, and he was going to have to make. It was a tough call he was going to have to make. I thanked the stars that I wasn't in a leadership position. Just being here, having this conversation nauseated me. Eventually, he looked over at Hooflix. Commander, we're going to need to consider this from all angles. Call the senior officers into the boardroom. Karma, I'd like for you to join us. And you, Commander Anthony. He glanced at Rupert. We all yes-sirred him and were dismissed. Rupert wheeled me out and Hooflix disappeared off to a console in the command centre. Rupert then wheeled me back up to the top level, across over the back of the command centre and into a conference room on the platform. We sat there awkwardly, trying to make sense of what was going on. What if the chief asked Central what their intentions are? I ventured. Rupert nodded. He's probably doing that now. That might be landing you in trouble with your oath thing. I shrugged. I'm not prepared for this. It's an ethical problem that I haven't got the insight or information to handle any better than I'm doing. Making that statement felt freeing. It was true. I was doing the best I could. Sure, there may be unintended consequences, but I can't see the future. I can only do what I think is right in the moment. Even looking back on what I'd just done, this was the only path that had been opened to me.